After studying this chapter, you shall be able to know about the comparison of handwriting, typewriters and prints produced by them and their individuality, and writer's identification. There are two fundamental fields of study pertaining to handwriting. Number one, the study of handwriting as a neuromuscular activity, its development as a skill, and the effect upon it of various internal and external factors. Number two, the study of handwriting identification as a discriminatory process. The second uses knowledge acquired through the first, but is entirely independent of it. Therefore, handwriting identification is a discriminatory process. Fingerprint identification is a discriminatory process. Firearm identification is a discriminatory process. Blood grouping is a discriminatory process. DNA analysis is a discriminatory process. Each is a discipline designed to study the respect in which human or material substances are similar or different in their chemical, biochemical, physical or psychological composition or behavior. Each studies a different kind of evidence to make discriminations. Handwriting identification is a discriminatory process that derives from the comparison of handwriting habits and an evaluation of the significance of their similarities or differences. What has been commonly and frequently referred to as characteristics or writing features or qualities of simply manifestation of the habit formed. They are discriminating elements of handwriting. Now, writing characteristics, that is habits, have been commonly described as being one of the two types. Number one, class characteristics, the product of prescribed writing system, and number two, individual characteristics, that is the particular idiosyncrasies of the individual. Class characteristics were predominant in the writings of the first half of this century, when adherence to prescribed writing system was strongly promoted in the educational system. But the current move to mechanical and electronic communicative processes and the concurrent loss of concern for writing excellence has meant that class characteristics are progressively less discernible and identifiable in the inscriptions of present-day writers. Thus, writing has become largely a composition or combination of individual characteristics. That's why it is called and claimed that they should be more readily discriminated from one another than when copybook was the writing design that everyone struggled to emulate. All recognized authorities define a handwriting identification as, for example, the finding of the same distinctive personal writing characteristic in both known and unknown writing in sufficient number that the likelihood of accidental coincidence is eliminated. As Hilton expressed it, such definitions invariably contain a rider or condition to the effect that there are no basic or fundamental differences between the two sets of writing, as Hilton does. This, of course, raised the question what constitutes a fundamental or significant difference. Presumably, it would indicate that two writings, despite other similarities, would not have been executed by the same person. We have sought to answer this question in part at least. Now, these comments notwithstand the answer to the present question, that is, handwriting identification is a comparison of habit in writing, behavior and performance. You know what? Comparison of handwriting is a special task and it needs experience, scientific approach, patience and hard work. The comparison of anything is always subjective, but in case of handwriting, it should be mentioned specifically because every person thinks about handwriting differently and sees it in different aspects. The comparison of handwriting is done in the following cases. Number one, to prove or disapprove the authenticity of a document. Number 2, to determine the authenticated signature and forgery. Number 3, to determine the writer of an anonymous letter. Number 4, to determine the writer of a threatening letter. Number 5, to prove the writing is of a particular person in case where alterations are made by a person to gain profit. Then, in cases where transaction of any property is involved. The last one would be, in the case of suicide notes found at the scene of crime, the comparison of handwriting should be done. The other important features of the comparison of handwriting are the natural variation and the master pattern. Now, let me tell you something about natural variation. Natural variation is the variation which is found naturally in the handwriting of a person. Natural variation is always indicative of the authenticity of a writer and is always present in documents. Since the forger cannot leave his natural variation and cannot incorporate the natural variation of the authenticated writer. If natural variation is present in a writing, it is thought to be original handwriting. The writing which lacks natural variation is always considered to be a forged handwriting. The second feature that we should always remember in the master pattern. Master pattern of handwriting can give us an idea of how variable a writer can write. That is, sometimes he or she writes letter A in capitals at the initial position when he or she starts a sentence, and sometimes he writes the same letter as small in the middle of the paragraph while starting a new line. A master pattern of the writing should be drawn by the expert for the purpose of comparison between the authenticated handwriting and questioned handwriting, because they can prove the fact in the court. All the characteristics of handwriting like slant, size, alignment, etc. play important role in determination of a writer's handwriting. Now, let me tell you why is document examination conducted. The examination of a document is conducted to determine its origin, that is, where did the document come from, its production source, that is, what person or machine produced it, its production process, that is, how was it made, its inscription, that is, what has faded or been obliterated, its chastity, that is, what changes, if any, have been made to it, its integrity, that is, it is genuine or false, its legitimacy, that is it an original document or a reproduction, and if so, what generation is it? The reason for seeking this information through a technical process is to shed light on events in the history of the document that have occurred prior to its arrival in the court. This will enable the court to confirm assumptions that may otherwise be made. It will also allow the court to review the correspondence between the technical testimony of the document itself and the oral testimony of the witness. Notwithstanding the breadth of scope of question document examination in practice, most examiners find that 70% of their work or more deals with the study of handwriting or of handwritten signatures. If some areas of criminal work tend to provide a somewhat different variety of tasks, certainly the private examiner finds that he or she is more constantly engrossed with handwriting. For these reasons, handwriting is deserving of our most comprehensive attention. Now, further studies will be done on the basis of graphic and visuals. Now, these are the characteristics for the handwriting comparison. Number 1. Slant. Slant can be said as the tilt in the handwriting that is either tilted towards right or left or not at all. According to the direction of the tilt, They are divided into right-handed slant, left-handed slant, and the last one, a straight slant. Number 2 would be size. Now, size, as it is not of much importance, the importance is of the relative size, not of the size of letter as such. The ratio of the size between two letters are more or less constant in a writer's handwriting, and if someone tries to forge the handwriting of a person, he or she has to forge this relative size ratio of the letters as well, which is merely impossible. But during forgery, the forger don't give importance to the size, slant, or anything else. He or she just tries to record the pictorial view of the writing to be copied. Number 3 would be alignment. Now, alignment of handwriting means the alignment of letters either above the line of writing or below the line of writing or with the line of writing. The alignment of illiterate person is poor and that of a skilled person is good. The alignment characteristic of a handwriting can be used for determining the way a writer writes, whether he or she writes with a good alignment of letters, words, and line, or bad alignment of all these. Number 4 would be line quality. Now, line quality can again be categorized as good, medium, or poor. This line quality also depends upon the speed and the rhythm of the writer. The more rhythmic the writer, the better his or her line quality will be. Number 5 would be embezzlement. Now, embezzlement is basically a characteristic of designing the letters, or more appropriately, decorating the letters. This decoration is very much unique but is not given much importance by various experts during comparison of handwriting because, in their view, it's a type of drawing which can be more easily simulated by the forger who is artistic in his or her approach. Then comes pen pause, pen lift, and pen pressure. The pen pause, pen lift, and pen pressure all are a function of the writer's hand and it's dependent on the writer's personal approach which handles the pen in a very specified and sophisticated way. All the above mentioned characteristics in combination gives us an idea of how we can analyze and compare the writing. Now, let us see the importance of master pattern and causes of natural variation. The cause of natural variation are very simple since human body is not a machine that can reproduce the same kind of writing every time. This reveals the fact that the variation can only be observed in the handwriting and not in typewritten document. The natural variation is always associated with an authenticated handwriting and not with the forged one because the forger tries to copy the handwriting or signature exactly in the same manner as the authenticated document is written in. And if the effort made for the simulation is good enough, then the forger may be able to copy the exact handwriting for one time or two, but the fact is whatever the forger will do, he or she will not be able to include the natural variations of the authenticated writer into his handwriting at all. The natural variation is how a person writes his name at one time and he rewrites it At other time, there are some factors which causes natural variation. You see, we humans are not a machine, so we will never be able to write in exact same manner twice. Now, natural variation is a naturally embedded character of a writer's handwriting. It is a sign of authentication. It is a character that is embedded in a document automatically. The master pattern of handwriting shows us the word to word difference in the handwriting and can help us to distinguish one handwriting from other. The master pattern is drawn very carefully, and all the initial, middle, and terminal letters are studied in master pattern. The use of master pattern in recognizing handwriting and proving its identity is of great importance and helps since it gives an overall picture that how a writer writes every letter. See, this is a writing sample which is to be analyzed with another writing sample for the purpose of identification of writer, that is whether both the documents are written by same writer or not. The question sampled has been designated as Q1. Now, this is the standard sample collected from the suspect for the purpose of comparison with the question document that was designated as Q1, and this one is designated as S1, which is the standard sample. Now the question here is whether the Q1 is written by the suspect or not. Now let us see how the comparison of above samples are done for the identification of writer. Number 1, for the comparison purpose, master pattern of both question and standard sample has been drawn, which are shown as the master pattern shown above is of the standard sample. Let us start with the letter A, which has to be written in different ways. Look at the variations in the loop of letter A, which can suggest the character of the letter at various positions as drawn in the master pattern. The next letter is the master pattern of letter O. The letter O has been found to be of more or less of the same pattern at every position. Now let us consider letter F. The letter F shows same pattern in the terminal and starting positions having a upward crossing stroke, but in the middle this crossing stroke is usually straight. Now let us consider letter T. Letter T is one of the most commonly used letter in any of the documents. See in the master pattern drawn, the initial position shows T with the upward stroking cap, and at middle and terminal positions the stroke passing T is straight. The next letter is letter G. The initial letter is not available in the document, and the middle letters at the middle and the terminal positions have been shown. The middle position of this letter shows straight slant, and at the terminal position the letter G has been drawn in a different pattern as lowercase g. The letter S is also one of the most common letters. The initial position of this letter shows two variants, while the middle and terminal positions are more or less same. All these characters of the letters which have been drawn in the master pattern should be studied and recorded carefully by the expert. Along with the master pattern drawn, the other features like slant, size, alignment, etc. should also be mentioned. Like in this case, the alignment is good. The slant of the writer is straight. The speed and rhythm is fair. There are pen lifts in the writing and pen pressure is constant. This is the master pattern of the question document designated as Q1. The master pattern shown here is of the standard sample, and the comparison of this master pattern having natural variation of certain letters of the writer may help in distinguishing the two writers. Let us start with the letter A, in which loop is more curved rather than small, as in the case of standard sample. In letter O, there is a small round curve in the upper part of the letter in the initial and terminal positions, and there is no such curve at the middle position. In letter T, also we can see the variation from the standard sample, as the stroke of the T always remains straight. The loop of the G is more curved than that in the standard sample. The letter S here shows more variation than that shown in the standard sample. The alignment of the writing is fair, the pen lift is rare, and pen pressure is constant. The speed and rhythm is of good quality. On the basis of the comparison made by drawing the master pattern and keeping the features in mind, it can be inferred that the two writing samples are from different writers. The above mentioned method of handwriting comparison is good and gives good results. After the comparison of handwriting of documents, opinions are made on the basis of findings. Now, let us talk over about opinion. The collection of observed physical characteristics is considered and evaluated in written opinion. The forensic document examiner should be able to demonstrate the reasons for the conclusions in a manner that makes the evidence clear to all concerned. Ideally, if findings are presented properly, the demonstration will lead the one reviewing the report or listening to the testimony to the same conclusion, although it may have been inferred that all conclusions resulting from the examination of a document are definitive. This is certainly not the case. Some questions, either because of their inherent nature or because of the material available, can only be answered with a qualified opinion. Obviously, these results are less desirable for both the document examiner and the parties involved. However, this does not alter the fact that qualified opinions are appropriate in some instances. In fact, there are certain types of problems that do not permit definitive findings, except perhaps in rare instances. The reader will find specific examples of these problems in subsequent chapters. The examiner who claims to employ methods that never led to an indefinite or qualified conclusion is one whose opinions should be considered with caution, if not skepticism. With the comparison of handwriting, and we have come to know that it is a special task and it needs experience and scientific approach and patience with combination of hard work to come to a conclusion. Now, the comparison of anything is always subjective, but in case of handwriting, we have mentioned in this chapter earlier that it is specifically because every person thinks about handwriting differently. and sees it in different aspects. The comparison of handwriting is done in various cases, as we have told you earlier. Some of the cases are to prove and disapprove authenticity of a document, to determine the authenticated signature and forgery, to determine the writer of an anonymous letter, and in cases such as threatening letter, blackmailing letter, and in cases to prove the handwriting is of particular person, such as in a case where alterations are made by a person to gain profit. Such cases can be of any big firm or MNC, and various cases where transaction of any property is involved. We have also seen comparison of handwriting and examination of handwriting can be done in cases of suicide notes found at the scene of crime. The comparison of handwriting is done so that we can find whether the victim has committed suicide or is unfortunate to become a victim of a murder. We have also learned that the natural variation is how a person writes his name at one time and he writes it at other time. There are some factors which causes natural variation, which are: human is not a machine. Natural variation is a naturally embedded character of a writer's handwriting. It is a sign of authentication. If natural variation is not present in a handwriting, the writing is not original. Then we have learned about the master pattern. The master pattern of handwriting shows us the word-to-word differences in the handwriting and can help us to distinguish one's handwriting from another. The master pattern is drawn very carefully, and all the initial, middle and terminal letters are studied in the master pattern. Slant, relative size, alignment, line quality are some other features which are important for handwriting comparison.